There's this one thing that Nietzsche said, and I want you to listen carefully because it might just change your whole perspective on life. It is this: when Nietzsche said, "God is dead," he wasn't celebrating. He was warning us. Now, most people, when they hear this claim, they think that Nietzsche was saying there isn't a God. And sure, that's one interpretation. But what if instead he was saying society has lost its belief in God? That's actually what he meant. And he warned that without God, we lose all meaning. So basically, the whole point of his claim isn't even about whether or not God exists, but rather what happens when a person loses faith in God. You see, Nietzsche lived during a time where Europe was rapidly changing. The old ways of thinking and living were being challenged, and many people were losing their faith in God and religion. He saw this happening and was deeply concerned about it because he realized that without God, people would no longer have a set of objective morals or a purpose for living. Before Nietzsche's time, most people in Europe were Christian. They believed in the Bible and followed the teachings of Jesus Christ. But during the 19th century, many people started to question these beliefs. They began to think for themselves and to challenge traditional ideas about God, morality, and society. This period of time is often referred to as the Enlightenment, and it had a huge impact on the way people thought about the world. Nietzsche was one of the first people to really explore what would happen if people stopped believing in God. He knew that without a belief in an all-knowing, all-powerful God, morality would become subjective. That means that each person would be able to decide for themselves what was right and wrong. And without a higher power to answer questions about the meaning of life, people would be left to figure it out for themselves. He called this the void, and he believed that most people couldn't handle it. You see, for centuries, people had relied on God to give them a sense of purpose and direction. They believed that they were put on earth to serve him and that after they died, they would either go to heaven or hell, depending on how they lived their lives. But if there was no God, then there was no heaven or hell, and there was no ultimate authority to dictate right from wrong. Nietzsche believed that only a few people could face the truth of this freedom. Most people, he thought, would be crushed by it. They would feel lost and without purpose. In a world without God, Nietzsche argued that people would need to create their own values and meaning. He called the person who was able to do this the Übermensch, which translates to Overman or Superman. The Übermensch was someone who was free from the constraints of traditional morality and who had the strength to create their own values. This doesn't mean that the Übermensch was immoral. Rather, it was someone who recognized that there were no absolute morals and decided to create their own. So yeah, Nietzsche's claim that God is dead isn't really about whether or not God exists. It's about what happens when people lose their faith in God. Nietzsche believed that this loss of faith would lead to a sense of meaninglessness and despair, but that it would also create the possibility for people to become more free and more creative. Ultimately, he thought that it was up to each individual to decide how to deal with the death of God. Here's the thing. Nietzsche was absolutely right when he said, God is dead. Throughout the 20th century, more and more people abandoned religion. Today, only a small percentage of people in Europe and North America identify as religious. But here's the twist. Nietzsche believed that the death of God was an end. He thought that it meant the destruction of traditional values and the decline of Western civilization. But what if instead it's a beginning? What if the death of God isn't an end, but rather a challenge? A challenge for each of us to create our own meaning and values and to strive to become the best versions of ourselves. If you like this video, you'll love the others. See you next time.